Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something that's honestly a little uncomfortable but absolutely crucial: the harsh, unfiltered realities of corporate restructuring. We're looking at exactly what happens behind closed doors when the economy turns sour, panic sets in, and companies have to make those really difficult decisions about who stays and who goes. More importantly, we're going to break down how you can completely transform yourself from a prime layoff target into an indispensable asset. Let's get right into it.
I want you to answer this honestly in your head right now. If your company announced massive layoffs tomorrow, are you truly safe? Well, here is a pretty stark warning right out of the gate from our source material. Simply showing up, sitting at your desk, and doing the bare minimum, that actually makes you an immediate default member of what the text calls the Restructuring Reserve Army. So, to figure out how to avoid the chopping block, we're diving into the core business strategies from this material. We want to see, objectively, exactly what kind of employees organizations fight tooth and nail to keep and who they systematically let go during a crisis. And look, this isn't about office politics. It's about the fundamental mechanics of business survival. To survive the restructuring era, the guide outlines three main rules you have to master. First, understanding the actual value organizations seek. Second, having the guts to report inconvenient truths. And third, developing your questioning and proposal skills. All right, let's jump right into section 1, the value organizations seek. Before we can even talk about why someone gets let go, we kind of have to ask why a company even exists in the first place, right? Well, it all boils down to this concept of value add, or generating what the text refers to as a plus alpha. Basically, when individuals come together to form a company, they absolutely must produce a result that's significantly greater than what they could have achieved just working totally alone. If you aren't generating this extra value, there's fundamentally no logical reason for the business to keep you around. Think about it like simple math. If you've got three people working together and their total output is just three, meaning 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3, they're really just a collection of individuals. They honestly might as well be working as freelancers. True organizational synergy means that 1 plus 1 plus 1 has to equal 4 or, even 5. But what happens when the economic weather changes? During a massive boom, sure, a company might let that 1 plus 1 equals 3 scenario slide. But when the economy tanks and the company is bleeding money, no way. They can only afford to keep the employees who are actively generating that plus alpha. Those passive workers just doing the bare minimum, they are absolutely the first ones cut. Which brings us to section 2, reporting inconvenient truths. This one is all about your communication reflexes. Like, what is your literal first reaction when a crisis, a red light, starts flashing on the front lines? The source material uses this incredibly chilling example of a defective fan heater. Imagine a frontline worker notices a manufacturing defect, but they hide it because they're scared of getting in trouble. Because it's hidden, that defect makes its way to consumers and leads to tragic carbon monoxide poisoning in their homes. So a simple frontline error suddenly snowballs into a massive recall that could literally bankrupt the entire organization. When disaster strikes, you basically have two paths. Path 1 is self-preservation. Sweeping bad news under the rug might save you for a day, but the second the truth surfaces, your credibility is destroyed instantly. Path 2 is honesty. The employees who immediately report those flashing red lights, even if it totally infuriates their boss in that exact moment, those are the people who earn the ultimate, long-term trust of top management. And here is the crazy paradox of the whole thing. The people who try the hardest to protect their own jobs by hiding inconvenient truths, they are ironically the very first ones targeted when the restructuring axe actually falls. Top management simply cannot steer a blind ship. If you hide bad news, you are just too dangerous to keep on the payroll. Okay, let's move on to section 3, questioning and proposal skills. This final survival phase requires a complete behavioral shift from just passively waiting around to actively proposing solutions. The text uses a great retail analogy. Imagine a clothing store salesperson. The passive approach is just blindly pushing a product, right? Like, hey, how about this new shirt? But the indispensable approach uses active questioning skills. What colors do you usually wear? What kind of occasion are you shopping for? True value isn't about forcing your idea. It's about asking the right questions to uncover the hidden underlying needs of your customer, or frankly, your boss. And once you uncover that need, you propose a solution. But here's the catch. Just having a brilliant proposal on paper isn't enough. When top management looks at your idea and asks, okay, this is great, but who is actually going to execute this? You have to step up. The indispensable employee looks management in the eye and takes total responsibility, declaring, "I will do it."
And you've got to follow through. An indispensable asset doesn't just pitch an idea and then ghost everyone. They constantly report back on their progress. Contrast that with what the text brilliantly calls the waiting for instructions tribe. These are the folks who finish a single task and just sit there silently until someone tells them what to do next. When restructuring happens, this tribe is always the very first to go. So to pull this all together, surviving a corporate restructuring requires a massive mental shift. You have the restructuring reserve army on one side, waiting for instructions, hiding mistakes out of fear, producing only the bare minimum. And on the other side, you have the indispensable asset, uncovering needs, proposing real solutions, reporting red lights immediately, and constantly pushing to create that vital plus alpha value. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to seriously think about your workday yesterday and your workday today. Are your daily actions genuinely adding that plus alpha value to your team? Are you the one raising your hand to solve the really hard problems? Or are you sitting quietly at your desk, just waiting for instructions, while your name slowly moves to the top of the restructuring reserve list? Answer that honestly, because your career really might depend on it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next explainer. Welcome to This Explainer. You know, if you've been glancing at the news lately, it is so easy to just feel completely overwhelmed by all the economic uncertainty out there. But today, we're flipping the script. We're going to dive into exactly how you can shift from feeling anxious about the economy to becoming an absolutely vital, irreplaceable part of your organization. We're breaking down some incredible source material that basically maps out a personal survival plan for your career. So, what actually separates the indispensable employee from everyone else during a recession? Well, what's really fascinating here is that the answer isn't just about mere survival. It's not about keeping your head down and just praying nobody notices you. No, it's about adopting 3 distinct pillars of resilience that fundamentally change how you operate and, honestly, how you're perceived by your peers and your leadership. To get there, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with overcoming recession, then look at the diligence learned from Ichiro, move on to language skills and fair spirit, tackle the easily misunderstood concept of full delegation, and finally wrap up with self-protecting Ho-Rin-So. All right, let's jump right into section 1, overcoming recession, employee studies. Look, it's a simple truth. The macroeconomy is intimidating. It just is. But relying purely on macroeconomic hopes or, waiting around for government policies to magically fix the market, that's not going to save you. As the source material points out, when your organization's red warning lights start flashing, you need a personal level salvation plan. And that plan is 100% rooted in creating undeniable, proactive value. You literally have to make yourself the employee they just can't afford to lose. So, how do we build that undeniable value? That brings us to section 2, diligence learned from Ichiro. There's this massive gap between the public myth of success and the actual reality. The public myth loves to lean on this idea of innate genius, right? Like it's just sudden inspiration. But the reality? It's the daily accumulation of effort. It is stubborn, relentless dedication to the craft. Honestly, people love to label successful individuals as geniuses because it kind of helps them avoid facing the sheer, daunting volume of mundane effort those exceptional people actually put in. Attributing someone's success purely to their natural talent is, well, it's actually a way of totally disregarding their daily, unglamorous grind. When you call someone a genius, you're almost dismissing the thousands of hours they spent sweating in the batting cages when absolutely no one was watching. And the author highlights the legendary baseball player Ichiro Suzuki as the absolute ultimate example of this. Think about this. When Ichiro was still playing in Japan, before he was a global superstar, he faced intense pressure from coaches to change his totally unique pendulum swing. They wanted him to conform to the standard way of doing things. They even threatened to demote him to the minor leagues. But he stood his ground. He firmly rejected that average standard to protect and pursue his own unique path. So the crucial takeaway here is that true talent isn't some kind of magic trick. It's actually the ability to maintain unwavering diligence. It's having the stubbornness to refine your own style until you hit that absolute pinnacle of mastery. True genius really only emerges when you push your unique path to its absolute limit, just continuously piling on that daily effort. All right, let's move on to our next pillar, Section 3, language skills, and fair spirit. The text strongly emphasizes that continuous study of a major global language, like English, is quite literally never wasted time. Even during a recession, especially during a recession, companies have to look outward. Investing your time here guarantees long-term returns in your own productivity. It directly expands your future possibilities and your ability to contribute, making you a highly versatile, recession-proof asset. But language is really just the starting point. It's also about adopting a broader mindset. Notice the stark contrast here between a traditional Japanese corporate environment and the American concept of fairness. We're talking about a shift from a system based entirely on seniority, age, and tenure to a merit-based system that judges you purely on your talent, your capability, and your actual results, completely regardless of your background or gender. It's moving from strict seniority to unwavering fairness. To really drive this point home, the author highlights the profound fairness of a society where even the son of a Kenyan immigrant can rise to become the president of the United States. In the text, this is used to demonstrate a really deep cultural belief in human equality and freedom, where your merit genuinely dictates how far you can go. Similarly, the source points to the bold appointment of Condoleezza Rice, an African-American woman, as Secretary of State. It illustrates a culture that prioritizes leveraging talent above all else. And this is exactly the mindset you need to adopt if you want to thrive globally. You have to believe that your capability trumps your demographics. And then you have to continually put in the work to build that capability. Now let's bring these high-level concepts right down to your day-to-day reality in Section 4, Easily Misunderstood Full Delegation. Oh man, this is a trap so many employees fall into. When your boss says, "I'm leaving this to you," or "I'm delegating this project," that is absolutely not a blank check to just go off and do whatever you want in a silo. It simply means your boss cannot physically do that specific part of the task themselves. They are entrusting it to you, yes, but that entrustment inherently requires periodic progress checks. Think about it like this. Imagine you handed your entire life savings over to a bank or an investment firm. You wouldn't just walk away and check back in 10 years, right? No way. You demand regular progress reports. Well, your boss is basically investing the company's resources and their own reputation into you. They expect the exact same level of updates when they hand over a project. And that brings us directly to our final pillar today, Section 5, Self-Protecting Horanso. If you're not familiar, in Japanese business culture, horanso is a crucial abbreviation for reporting, contacting, and consulting. And let me tell you, it is the ultimate defensive and offensive tool in your career arsenal. The truly indispensable employee doesn't just sit around waiting to be asked for an update. They possess the imagination to step right into their boss's shoes. They proactively anticipate the boss's anxieties. They ask themselves, okay, if I were the boss, when would I start getting worried about this? And then they provide timely updates long before those problems ever arise. Mastering this is pretty straightforward if you follow these 3 clear steps. Step 1, accept the delegated task. Step 2, anticipate your boss's concerns and their perspective. Step 3, execute timely reporting, contacting, and consulting. By actively doing this, you're not just blindly following orders. You're actually managing the professional relationship and practically guaranteeing the project's success. Now, I get it. Sometimes this level of constant communication can feel a bit intense, maybe even a little micromanaging. But the author makes it extremely clear. Strictness from a boss and the requirement of constant reporting are not forms of punishment. They aren't toxic micromanagement. They're actually mechanisms designed to prevent you from making a fatal career-ending mistake. Horansoul is a vital safety net. That strictness is actually meant to nurture and protect you, just as much as it protects the company. Finally, the source material introduces this really fascinating concept, treating your education and language skills as a hidden sword. As you communicate with superiors, you should always be polishing the sword of broad knowledge. When you possess a deep well of general knowledge and language proficiency, you maintain a certain level of respect and authority in the room. You ensure that when the crucial moment comes, you're never caught off guard and you're never talked down to. It gives you the quiet confidence to navigate literally any corporate hierarchy. I think this quote perfectly captures the essence of today's explainer. To survive a recession, we must not rely on passive luck, but rather continuously sharpen our skills, effort, and communication. Your job security, especially when the economy takes a hit, is entirely dependent on your proactive diligence, your continuous skill sharpening, and your empathetic communication through Hohenso. You don't wait around for luck, you manufacture your own security. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on before your next workday. What is the one skill that you will stubbornly improve tomorrow to make yourself totally indispensable? Channel your inner Ichiro, polish that hidden sword of yours, and start building your undeniable value. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to break down the ideas that shape our world.
So have you ever noticed this kind of strange paradox at work? You meet someone with a top-tier degree, off-the-charts test scores, just a truly brilliant mind, yet they somehow completely flounder when it comes to actual professional success. I mean, why does raw intellect and a prestigious academic background so often fail to translate into a fulfilling career? Well, today we're diving into some source material that offers a really fascinating perspective, one that fundamentally flips how we think about what it takes to thrive at work.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're exploring what we're going to call the inside-out success model. The core premise here is that your internal mindset, your deeply held psychological and spiritual attitudes, is the ultimate driver of your career. It's not just about technical skill, and it's definitely not just about being quote-unquote book smart. According to this framework, true, lasting professional fulfillment is dictated by what goes on inside your head and your heart.
Our insights today come directly from this text, Work Methods to Overcome the Recession. Specifically, we're unpacking the psychologically driven work methodologies outlined in Chapter 3, which the author actually refers to as the scientific work method of happiness. It really explores how intertwining career success with personal happiness requires a highly specific mental methodology.
So here is our mental roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to break down 5 philosophical pillars. First, the law of success and happiness. Second, moving from jealousy to blessing. Third, blooming in your own nature. Fourth, the aesthetic of not blaming the past. And finally, the pitfalls of the exam smart.
All right, let's jump straight into Pillar 1, the law of success and happiness.
So the author argues for this highly specific type of workplace law of attraction. It dictates that a bright, positive, and constructive outlook isn't just about, being that cheerful, pleasant person everyone likes to share a cubicle with. It's actually a strategic necessity. According to the text, the thoughts you vividly paint in your mind will physically draw similar outcomes towards you. If you're constantly looking at the dark, pessimistic side of things, you literally suppress your own potential and attract failure and isolation. The big takeaway? Holding a constructive view of life is the absolute seed of professional success.
Moving right along to Pillar 2, shifting from jealousy to blessing. This is a crucial mindset shift.
The text draws a really stark contrast between two very different reactions to other people's success. When you feel jealousy, when you secretly hope someone fails or you just refuse to acknowledge their strengths, the text argues that you are fundamentally shrinking your own capacity. You become petty and, ironically, you stunt your own growth. On the flip side, the act of blessing someone, actively praising them and sincerely acknowledging their good qualities, that actually expands your own potential. Affirming successful people around you creates a mental environment where you can grow too. Basically, acknowledging others' strengths is exactly how you mature into a leader.
Okay, pillar number 3, blooming in your own nature or discovering your true calling.
The text relies on this incredibly specific visual metaphor here. A morning glory seed cannot bloom into a sunflower. It sounds so simple, right? But think about how many people spend their entire careers wishing they were a sunflower, looking at the actual sunflowers in the office with that exact jealousy we were just talking about. The text emphasizes how critical it is to objectively look at your own nature and figure out exactly what kind of flower you are uniquely meant to be, rather than agonizing over why you aren't someone else.
So, the crucial point isn't just identifying your innate talents, but dedicating lifelong, focused effort to polishing those specific talents. The source material warns against just looking at the surface-level results of others and trying to swap your life for theirs. You don't see the massive, hidden accumulation of effort beneath their surface. Instead of envying them, you really have to strive fiercely to bloom as brightly as you possibly can, exactly where you are, using the precise tools you were given.
Which brings us to Pillar 4. The aesthetic of not blaming the past.
The author outlines a strict, totally non-negotiable rule here. You must never badmouth your previous company, your former boss, or your old colleagues. The text observes this massive trend in our highly fluid modern society where people constantly switch jobs and then immediately start complaining that their past environment was terrible or their former colleagues were holding them back.
But the author frames refraining from these complaints as a fundamental ethic, or an aesthetic, of a true working professional. Complaining about past jobs demonstrates a really dangerous lack of personal accountability, because if you constantly blame the environment, you aren't taking ownership of your own path. A true professional accepts that they chose to be there, they take the lessons learned, and they move forward in silence regarding the negatives. Holding your tongue is a real mark of wisdom and maturity.
And finally, Pillar 5, the pitfalls of the exam smart and why book smarts often fail.
Let's bring all these concepts together to totally deconstruct our initial question. Why do people who are only book smart often fail in the real world? Well, here we see the core paradox identified by the author. You have individuals who are absolutely brilliant at passing exams. They've got the pedigree, they memorize the textbooks, yet frequently, these high academic achievers completely lack the crucial internal mindsets we've just been discussing. The skills that make someone good at solitary studying often fail to develop the emotional and spiritual intelligence you actually need to navigate a complex workplace.
The author actually pinpoints 3 specific flaws in the failing exam-smart worker. First, a total lack of consideration. They simply don't notice the needs of those around them. Second, dull intuition. They might know the textbook answer, for sure, but they misread the room or the actual context entirely. And third, a lack of imagination. They just can't visualize scenarios beyond what is explicitly written down in a manual. These traits are the exact opposite of the constructive, empathetic, and expansive mindset required for true success.
So how do we fix this? The text proposes some highly rational solutions to overcome these exact flaws. First, you've got to carve out solitary time specifically for self-reflection, to check your ego and truly understand your own nature. Second, you have to deliberately shift your focus outward and actively observe your colleagues in your environment to build up that missing consideration and intuition. And third, you must continuously train your imagination by thinking deeply about things before they happen, anticipating needs rather than just reacting to them.
The big overarching message from this source material really emphasizes absolute ownership. The text argues that whether you're dealing with a tough boss or a past failure, you have to take 100% responsibility for your own career and mindset to truly bloom. So, based on this framework, I want to leave you with this question. What is one lingering complaint or piece of jealousy that you can let go of today to test this model for yourself? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.